Having beautiful fall decor in your home does not have to be expensive. Hi friends, my name is Chantel, and in today's video I'm going to share with you 20 of my best budget-friendly DIYs for fall. This DIY is a dupe of this cute fall truck decor from Kirkland's. On sale, it's $32. We're going to make it for less. For this project, I'm going to be using this spring truck sign that I had in my stash, but I have seen truck signs at Dollar Tree for fall as well. I'm also going to be using one of these wooden rulers from Dollar Tree. And I'm going to be using the pumpkins off of this floral stem from Dollar Tree. This eucalyptus that I'll be using, I picked up at Walmart. I believe it was about $3, but it is really nice quality and a good size. And then I'll also be using just a few pieces of greenery and some little white berries. These are just kind of leftovers from other projects, but I'll be using those to fill in on my project. And I'm going to be painting my truck using this ink colored chalk paint from Waverly. I'm going to start by removing the hanger, and then I am going to cut out the back window of this truck. And I don't want mine to be quite as big as the one that is shown here on this sign, so I'm just measuring in a little ways, and then I'm going to cut out where I marked using a razor knife. I just placed a little cutting mat from Dollar Tree underneath my sign and used a razor knife with a sharp blade in it. And this did take several times of going over this, so I definitely need to be careful doing this because you do have to apply some good pressure to get this cut out. But I just was careful and went over it multiple times to get that little window cut out. Once I had it cut out, I took some sandpaper and just went over this to smooth out those cut edges, and then I also went over the front of the sign where it had some glitter from the design just to kind of smooth that out as well. I also used just a little craft spatula to remove the Hello Spring sign from this truck sign because I don't need that on there, and this just popped right off. It was very easy to take off, and it did rip the paper a little bit, but that doesn't matter because this is actually going to be the back of my sign. Next, I'm going to take my black chalk paint and I am going to paint both sides of the truck completely with the black paint. Next, I'm going to take my wood ruler and remove those little plastic strips on the sides. They just peel right off. Then I'm going to cut it down so that it is a little bit longer than the width of my truck. And this is one that I already had. It was painted with an off-white color and then dry brushed with a little bit of brown paint. And so I'm just going to use it because it's what I already had. I'm first going to write the words Welcome Fall with a pencil on my little ruler, and then when I'm happy with how that looks, I'm going to use a Sharpie marker and just trace over that pencil. And then using some hot glue, I'm going to attach that right over the top of the tires so it looks like the bumper of the truck. Next, I want to add a couple of tail lights to my truck. So I went through my stash and I found some larger size brads that were left over from my scrapbooking days. So I'm going to use those. If you don't have something like that, you could just paint some dots on to be your tail lights. So I'm just using some wire cutters to cut off the prongs of those brads, and then I'm going to hot glue them to my sign. Next, I'm going to cut some pieces of the eucalyptus and lay this on the back of my truck. I want it to kind of look like my truck is piled full of all of this fall uh, greenery and pumpkins. I really like these little pumpkins on this stem that you can find at Dollar Tree, although when you pull them off, then your pumpkins no longer have a stem. And so I'm just using one of those uh, skewers that's from like the barbecue section at Dollar Tree, and I'm cutting little pieces of that. I'm going to use some Waverly Antique wax and paint them, and then I will glue them to my pumpkins. I'm going to continue laying out my florals on this until I like the way it looks. So I'm just going to place my pumpkins and then my little greenery stems and white berries until I have it just the way I want it, and then I will start to glue it on. And one thing that I do is once I have it where I'm happy with it, I snap a picture with my phone, and that way I can use that for reference as I'm gluing it together. Because as you can see here, I kind of have to take it back apart so that I can start gluing things down from the bottom working up. To finish this off, I'm just going to add a jute twine hanger to the top using those holes that were already in this sign. Just push that through and tie some knots on the back side, and this is all finished. And I have to say, I love the way this looks. I love the contrast of the black truck. I know a lot of people use the red truck or even like the blue truck, but I really like the contrast of the black. Let me know what you think. And also, I would like to say if you are returning to my channel, thank you so much for coming back and watching this video. If you are new to my channel, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. If you like Dollar Tree DIYs and DIYs on a budget, then be sure to subscribe because I do a lot of that here on this channel. For this next project, I'm going to be using 3 different sized pumpkin signs from Dollar Tree. I'll also be using this wood hanging sign that I got from Dollar Tree. There's no dimensions on it. I would say it's about 18 inches long and about 5 inches wide. A couple of other things from Dollar Tree that I'll be using are these color your own ornaments in the leaf shape and one of these leaf harvest DIY pins. And I'll also be using some jute twine. For paint, I'll be using this Rust-Oleum chalk paint. Did you see that? The lid almost came off. That could have been a disaster. Anyway, this is a chiffon cream. It's kind of an off-white color. And then I'll also be using a blue craft paint. This is the color Cascade by Folk Art. And I'll be using an orange paint. And this one's a little bright, so I'm actually going to be adding some brown to it as well. To prep my pumpkins, I'm going to remove all of the embellishments off of them and all of the labels. A heat tool can be very helpful for this. It helps loosen the glue and makes it a lot easier to get some of these things off. And they work great for labels too. I do have direct links to all of my favorite crafting tools in the description box below, as well as a link to my Amazon store, so be sure to check those out. If you use a heat tool on galvanized embellishments, make sure you be careful because it will make them very hot. And then another tip is if you have any glue left on your project, just sand over it with some sandpaper and that will help take it off, as well as it will have the sawdust kind of stick to any of the stickiness that's still there, and then it will not be sticky anymore. So I'm going to use the chiffon cream and I am going to paint the largest pumpkin using this paint. And I started painting and then I realized that I needed to fill the hole in the top of the stem where the hanger was. And I like to use hot glue for this sometimes. You could use wood filler, but I find that a hot glue works well and dries a lot quicker. So my trick for this is to turn your project wrong side facing up and put a metal ruler underneath that hole that you're going to fill. Fill it with some hot glue and then hold it tightly down to the ruler until the glue is completely set. And then when you pop it off of the ruler, it will be flush and smooth, and then you can paint over it. And I just repeat this process for any of the other pieces that have the holes in them as well. Okay, so now that that's taken care of, I can finish painting my large pumpkin with the chiffon cream paint. And I did end up putting 2 coats of paint on this. My medium-sized pumpkin I'm going to paint orange, and since my orange paint was really bright, I decided to add a little bit of brown to it because I want more of a burnt orange color. And then I didn't really like that, so I added a little bit of red paint to this as well, and that gave me the color that I wanted. And then for my smallest pumpkin, I am going to use that Cascade Blue colored paint and paint it. And this did take 3 or 4 coats to cover up that W on the front. So if I would have sanded it off to begin with, it probably would not have taken so many coats of paint, but I didn't. So if you are an impatient crafter like I am, the heat tool is great for helping to dry paint, and you don't have to wait as long in between coats. So now that the paint is dry on my large pumpkin, I'm going to take a little bit of brown paint and a dry brush, and I'm going to dry brush on this pumpkin some lines that are kind of curved. This will help give the pumpkin dimension and make it look like it's more rounded. And I'm just doing this lightly at first, and then I'm going to keep adding a little bit until it's the darkness that I want. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of highlighting just around the edges of the pumpkin and on the stem. On my orange and blue pumpkins, I'm going to do some dry brushing using the chiffon cream colored paint and just go around the edges to highlight that and bring out a little more dimension on those as well. So now I'm going to add some fun detail to these. I am going to take the orange and the blue pumpkin, and I'm going to take the end of a paintbrush and dip it in my paint, and then I am going to dot polka dots on both of these pumpkins. Then I'm going to do the same thing using the brown paint on my off-white pumpkin. I've already filled in the holes on the top of my larger leaves using the hot glue, and I'm removing the little clothespin off of the back of the small leaf, and then I'm going to paint all of them using my same brown paint. Once all of the polka dots are dry, it's time to add my leaf embellishments, and I'm going to use this berry garland to do that. So I'm just going to take a small piece and twist it a little bit and wrap it around the stem. I'm going to secure it with a little bit of hot glue on the back side of the leaf, and then I am going to place that along the stem and wrap some jute twine around it, securing it to the pumpkin. And then I'll just tie a knot in the jute twine. And then I'm just going to repeat the same process on both the orange and the blue pumpkins. Next, I'm going to take that unfinished wood plank sign from Dollar Tree, and I am going to use this as a backing for my pumpkins. So I don't need to fill in the holes where I took out the hanger. I'm just going to be gluing the pumpkins to this. Because of the thickness of that small pumpkin in the front, this sign actually stands up on its own. You could add a hanger to this, but I think this would be perfect sitting on a fireplace mantle or a shelf, and I think it turned out so whimsical and cute. All of my supplies for this next DIY are all from Dollar Tree. I'm going to be using these 3 boxes. These I had left over from a previous project, and so if you can't find this design, you may be able to find some different boxes that would work as well. I'm also going to be using some tumbling tower blocks, an assortment of fall leaves, one of these berry garlands in the fall colors, and some of these little decorative acorns. Dollar Tree typically carries some type of candle holders for fall, and these are some I think I picked up last year that I had in my stash, so I'm going to be using these. I'm also going to be using one of these candle holders as well as some Spanish moss. Depending on what type of boxes you get, you may want to paint them. I did paint these on the front and the back using some ivory chalk paint, and then I did dry brush them a little bit with a brown just to give them a little bit of a distressed look. And then I'm going to take the 3 boxes and just glue them together so I have one long piece. Next, I'm going to take the tumbling tower blocks and I'm going to glue 3 of them into the center of the box on the end. And then I'm going to take 3 more blocks and glue on top of those blocks. This is going to make a little riser to set my candle holders on. And then I'm going to repeat this same process on the other box on the other end, but I'm not going to do it on the center box. I'm going to be placing the candle holder in the center box, and to keep it in the center, I am going to add a little bit of hot glue to the bottom just so that it doesn't slide around. Next, I'm going to add some Spanish moss around my little block risers and around that candlestick in the center. Then I'm going to add my green candle holder to that candlestick in the center, and my two burgundy colored candle holders will go on the risers on either side. Sometimes the ribbons and embellishments on some of the Dollar Tree items can be kind of funky. Don't be afraid to make them over. Redo the ribbons or change them out, or add your own embellishments because you can really make it look like a high-end item just by adding a little bit of your own touch. Next, I'm going to cut some leaves off of this garland that I got at Dollar Tree, and I'm going to just start placing them around the candle holders and sticking them kind of down inside the moss and just kind of making it kind of really random looking. And then after I get the leaves kind of placed where I want them, I'm going to add that berry garland. And I'm going to use this whole garland. I want to twist it around in and through the leaves and around the candle holders and just make it look just really random. I'm just kind of going for a more natural look with the leaves and this berry garland. Then I'm going to take those little decorative acorns and I'm going to just kind of sprinkle them around in the tray just to add a little extra embellishment. And then I'll take some of these little LED candles from Dollar Tree and put them inside the candle holders. These come in a 2-pack and I think these are perfect for this centerpiece. This next project uses this long unfinished wood sign with the pumpkin cutout on the top. This is also from Dollar Tree. In fact, all the supplies that I'm using for this project are from Dollar Tree. I'm going to be using this little square crate and this little bottle that has the tree charm on it, and this fits perfectly inside the little square crate. I also picked up this cute little pillowcase, and I think I'll be using this as well. And this year, Dollar Tree has some really pretty colors of these leaves and pumpkins and berries, so I'll be using these. I'll be using this Waverly Antique Wax, but you could pick up some brown paint from Dollar Tree and water it down to make a stain. The hanger on this sign is a little bit short, so I'm going to take this off because I will be adding my own jute twine hanger that's a little bit longer. I'm going to use my antique wax and go over both the front and the back of this sign, and I did water it down just a little bit so that it was a little bit thinner so that my wood grain would be sure to show through this antique wax. And if you did a stain, you could do it as light or as dark as you wanted. I am going to be attaching that little wood crate to the front of this sign, but I did want it to stand out a little bit, so instead of doing the stain the same way that I did on the sign, I'm just dry brushing some on so that some of that light natural wood is showing through. And I did do this on the inside of the box as well, since you can kind of see in the box a little bit, but I thought this made it have enough contrast that it showed up nicely on the sign. And I attached it to the sign using some hot glue. And I don't know what happened to my footage, but I just cut out a piece of that fabric pillowcase and put it behind the little pumpkin cutout, and then I tied on some jute twine to the hanger. And Then I took my leaves and I made a little arrangement and put them inside that bottle and set it in the little crate. And that's all there is to this. It was super easy and I think it makes a very unique and fun fall wall decor piece. So as I was rearranging my florals, I decided that I wasn't super happy with the fabric. The blue is a little bit different in it, and so I decided to use one of these hammered metal tags from Dollar Tree. And if you get these, they do have a plastic film over the top or on both sides, so you want to make sure you take that off so you have a nice, shiny, pretty finish. So I just cut the hanger off of that and then I removed the fabric that I had put on there and I ended up just replacing it with this metal tag. It fit on the back of this just perfect. It was barely big enough, but it covered that whole pumpkin cutout and I really like the way this looks. So don't be afraid to try different things. If you make something one way and you don't care for it, then change it up. And I'm really glad that I changed this because I love the look of this hammered metal tag on that pumpkin cutout. For this project, I will be using two of the wire pumpkin wreath frames from Dollar Tree. I'll also be using one of these wood planks from the Crafter's Square section at Dollar Tree, as well as some floral foam. And I'll be using several of these black zip ties that I picked up at Dollar Tree as well. For the candle holder in the middle of my centerpiece, I chose this vase from Dollar Tree. I thought the colors would go really pretty with my florals that I will be using, but you could use a clear vase or any candle holder of your choosing. I'm also going to be using some of this amaranthus from Dollar Tree and a little bit of jute twine. And in my last trip to Dollar Tree, I picked up these fun pumpkins that I will be using in this centerpiece as well. For my lighting in this, I will be trying out this little LED candle. I picked it up at Hobby Lobby for just a few dollars. Or I'm also going to try these little fairy lights, the battery powered fairy lights from Dollar Tree, and see which one I like best. To start off with, I'm going to take my two wire wreath forms and place them back to back and then zip tie them together. I do want to give a shout out to Catherine from Do It on a Dime, who I got the idea of putting these two frames together like this from. So thank you, Catherine. She put little pumpkins in hers and it was really cute. I'm going to be making a centerpiece with mine. So I'm just taking a little bit of antique wax by Waverly and giving my little wood plank a good coat of this on both sides and around the edges. Then I'll wipe off the excess and just let that dry really well. And even though this really isn't going to show very much in our finished project, I just wanted it to have a nice finished look. So now I'm going to use my hot glue gun and some Gorilla Glue sticks, and I am gluing my pumpkin frame to the wood plank just to give it a base so that it will stand upright on its own. Now I'm going to take my little foam block and I am going to cut it down because it's just a little bit too tall. And so I have found that these little metal rulers from Dollar Tree work really well for this, and you can just slice it right through the floral foam, and I think it works great. And now I'm going to glue that floral foam right on top of the bottom of the wire pumpkin frame where it is glued to that wood plank. And I did push it down so that the wires were kind of going into the foam. Next, I'm going to take my jute twine and wrap it around the neck of my vase a couple of times, just tie a knot in that just to add a little bit of an accent to it. And this is going to tie it together with those pumpkins that I'll be using as well. And I did decide to cover my floral foam with a little bit of Spanish moss. This is probably optional because the florals are going to disguise the floral foam for the most part, but I just didn't want any of that floral foam showing through it all, so I covered the block with the Spanish moss. So my little vase is going to sit in the middle of that floral foam, and then I am going to just take some of my leaf florals that I got at Dollar Tree, and I love these colors they have this year, and I cut them apart and I just start arranging them, moving them around until I really like the way that it looks. I did decide to add a little hot glue to the bottom of my vase just to help hold it in place, and that made it a little bit easier to work with here as well. These braided raffia pumpkins are on a dowel, like a little wooden dowel. So I used some wire cutters to trim that down a little bit. And then I stuck 3 of those into my arrangement. And to tie in with my vase, I am going to use some of these burgundy amaranthus from Dollar Tree. And since I felt like they were a little bit long, I actually cut them in half and just stuck them randomly in the arrangement. And I felt like this really tied that top color of the vase into the whole floral arrangement. Now that I'm satisfied with my florals, I'm going to add my light. This is the little LED light that I picked up at Hobby Lobby. I love these. They look so realistic, but I do want to see what the little fairy lights look like as well. And I did end up adding a couple of little leaves, just kind of laying them over that battery pack to disguise them. But let me know in the comments below, which one did you like the best, the little LED candle or the fairy lights? I think I am leaning to the little flickering LED light. It just looks so natural, and I just really am pleased with how this turned out. It's going to look beautiful on my table for fall. For this next centerpiece, I will be using 2 of these unfinished wood trays from Dollar Tree. You could also use some of their little square wall art pieces. And I will be using one of these pedestal candle holders and one of these clear round vases, also from Dollar Tree. I found this little black and white check pumpkin at Dollar Tree, but you could use just some black and white check fabric and cover another pumpkin. The florals I'll be using are these black-eyed Susans that I had on hand from Dollar Tree. You can use sunflowers or any other yellow florals that you'd like. And I'm going to be using some of these blue sweater material pumpkins, as well as these little miniature black and white checked pumpkins, these paper sunflowers, and some black and white checked ribbon, all from Dollar Tree. The paints I will be using are Rust-Oleum's chalk paint in the color linen white and Waverly chalk paint in the color ink. To make a base for my centerpiece, I am going to take my 2 wood trays and I'm going to glue one on top of the other with the top sides together. I like these little trays for this because it actually gives support in the middle, not just around the edges. So I'm going to make sure I don't have any hot glue sticking out around the edges. Then I am going to take my Rust-Oleum chalk paint in the linen white and I'm going to paint this base. Once the paint is dry, I'm going to take my ink colored chalk paint and I'm going to dry brush over this base. If you are new to crafting, dry brushing just means you put a little bit of paint on a dry brush and then you wipe off the excess on a paper towel, then lightly brush over your project, and this will leave some streaks and lines in some of the raised areas and just across your project to give it that distressed look. Now I'm going to glue my ribbon around my base, just right where I glued those two trays together, and that will hide that seam and just dress this up a little bit. So my inspiration for this project was this fabric that I found in the Crafter's Square aisle at Dollar Tree, and I just love the color combinations and the cute trucks, but the fabric is really busy, so I am just using this as inspiration for this centerpiece. Before I start gluing things down, I am just going to take all of my elements and gather them together, start laying them out and arranging them and moving them around until I am satisfied with how they look, and then I will start gluing things down. And one thing to remember when you are creating a centerpiece is to try and make sure that it looks good from all sides, because if it's sitting in the center of a table, then it's going to be seen from all sides. So that's just a little tip to keep in mind. Now that I have my pumpkins and my big flowers glued on, I'm going to add these little sunflowers in, and I am leaving them on the wires so I can kind of make them stick up in the arrangement. I'm going to place this clear vase on the top of that pillar candle holder, and I'm just adding a pumpkin and some flowers to this, but you could put a candle in it. You could also use it kind of like a little candy dish. I would just recommend that you glue that to the pillar candle holder so that it doesn't fall off when people are reaching in to grab candy. But this is very versatile. I love that it's a little bit different and unique for fall with the different colors, but I just think it turned out super adorable. First, I'm going to start out with this 14-inch bicycle wheel wreath form. And I'm actually going for kind of an end of summer transitioning into fall wreath. So I picked out some florals from Dollar Tree that I thought would be good for going into fall, but would still look kind of like summer. I'm also going to be using this unfinished wood sign from Dollar Tree that says thankful and blessed. For this project, I only want to use one of the words, so I'm going to use a craft knife and carefully cut them apart. I almost forgot to cut the "and" sign off, but here I'm cutting it off and I'm going to save it because it might be good to use for another project. Next, I'm going to take a little bit of sandpaper and just sand off those places where I cut the words apart just to smooth them out a little. And I decided, since I was going for more of an end of summer transitioning into fall look, that I would paint this more of a sage green color instead of going with like an orange or a yellow or a brown. But I think those colors would be pretty too, or you could paint the word black, but since the bicycle wheel frame was black, I thought having a contrasting color would be better. Once my green paint is dry, I'm going to come in with some just off-white colored chalk paint, and I'm going to dry brush across this just to soften it up, give it a little bit of an aged look. So the edges of these signs are already stained a little bit darker, and so the areas where I cut the words apart, the lighter wood is showing. So I'm going to take a little bit of antique wax from Waverly and a small brush and just go over those little areas where I cut the words apart so that they're all the same color. Next, I'm going to start arranging my florals. So I'm going to take my flowers that I got from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to cut them off using some wire cutters so I have all individual flowers instead of these bunches. So I always like to lay out my florals before I start attaching anything to my project. So I'm going to just start arranging them and get an idea of what I want it to look like. And now that I have something that I like, I'm going to take this gold floral wire that I got at Dollar Tree. It's very thin and easy to work with. You can cut it with scissors, and I really like it for wrapping around the stems of flowers when I'm attaching them to these wreaths. So I'm going to carefully remove my flowers, kind of keeping them a little bit in the order that I had them. And then I'm going to just work in smaller bunches and take some wire and wrap it around the frame. This is just an easier way to attach it because hot glue does not work to glue to the wire frame, so this wire works really well. So I'm going to start with some of these smaller yellow flowers at the top, and then I'm going to alternate my softer yellow and the brighter yellow flowers and just work down one side of the wreath and add in a few of the smaller ones as I go. And I also had some little white flowers left over from some other projects, so I added some of those in, and I really like how this is turning out. When I get to the end, I'm going to wrap my wire around several times just to secure those stems really well. This is not going to show because I am going to put a ribbon bow over the top. And I decided to go with this ribbon from Dollar Tree that's really pretty yellow with these brown sunflowers on it. I thought this was perfect for transitioning from summer to fall. And since the design is only on one side of the ribbon, I am having to twist it after every loop that I make. So I am twisting it in the center before I loop the ribbon around. I'm going to make 5 loops on each side, and then I'm going to do a loop in the center. So I have a total of 11 loops, and this will make the perfect size bow. And I'm just going to take some of the floral wire and put through the center of the bow and wrap it around and twist it tight to hold the bow. And then I can use that same wire to attach the bow to the wreath. And then I'll also use a little bit of hot glue just to help secure it in place. To attach my blessed sign, I'm going to use some of this thin jute twine from Dollar Tree, and I am just tying it through the top of the letter B, and then I'm going to loop it around a couple of those top spokes of the bicycle wheel, and then back into the top of the letter D at the end of the word. And so it's just basically hanging there. Then I trim off the excess twine, and this project is finished. I really like how this turned out with the word painted in the green, but I also wanted to try using the other word, the thankful word, and stain it brown and see what it looked like. And I think this really looks more fall-like and is really pretty as well. Let me know in the comments below which one you like. And of course, you could use any color scheme for your florals. So if you wanted it to be more fall-like, you could add more oranges and browns into your florals. It's really just whatever you want it to look like. For this next project, I'm going to be using the football wreath form from Dollar Tree. They usually start putting these out about the same time they put out the back to school things and fall items. And I'm also going to be using a couple packages of this nautical rope, as well as some jute twine. I'll be using one of these wood stems from this package that I got at Dollar Tree a while back. You could just use a piece of wood or stick from your yard, so you don't have to buy it necessarily. But since I had them from a different project, I thought I would use them. I'm also going to be using several pine cones. These are some I picked up after Christmas last year for like 25 cents for that whole package. And I'll be using some of these leaves from this leaf garland from Dollar Tree. So I started by tying my jute twine to one end of the football frame, and I'm going to be wrapping the whole outside rim of this in this jute twine. And so I started doing this, and then I realized I had missed a step. I wanted to spray paint this frame because it's like a really dark green, or maybe even it's just black, it's hard to tell, but I wanted to spray paint it the same color as the jute twine. So I paused, and I didn't want to unwrap my jute twine, what I'd already done, because it's a little time consuming. And so I put some painter's tape over the top of it, and then I took it outside and spray painted it this nutmeg color. This is from Rust-Oleum. I just picked it up at Walmart for under $4, but it's the perfect color to use with the jute twine. It will help the frame just blend in so much better. So after my spray paint was dry, then I finished wrapping the outside edge of my football frame with the jute twine, and then I tied it off at the end, and I did leave a little bit of twine when I cut that off so that I could tie a loop there just to make a hanger for this piece. So next I'm going to take some jute twine, and I am going to tie it to that top horizontal piece on the football frame, and I'm tying it on the inside so that the knot is concealed on the inside. And since my spool won't fit through the wreath form, I'm going to pull off a nice long piece of twine and cut that off. Just wind it around my hand so it's a little bit easier to work with. And then I'm going to be wrapping this randomly on the outside of the football, stretching from that top horizontal piece down to the bottom of the football, over to the sides, just kind of back and forth and all around. Just real random. You'll see what I'm doing here, but I'm just going to fill it in until it looks good to the eye and I'm happy with it. So I'm thinking this looks pretty good. I'm going to finish it off, and then I will tie off the twine and secure it with just a little bit of hot glue.
Now I'm going to take my nautical rope and I am going to be creating the top little cap of my acorn. So I am going to put a little hot glue in the end of the rope. I remove the tape that's around it and then just put a little hot glue in between the strands of the rope, twist it together. Those little finger protectors are gold in this situation. And so I do that to both ends of the rope, and then I am going to attach it on the back side of my frame. And I actually started this a little bit high. You'll see later I add a few more rows. So I would say almost, like, not quite halfway down is maybe where you want to start it. Just kind of eyeball what you think looks good. And so then I'm just going to stretch this across the football frame and then back around the back and just kind of wrap it around. And I will secure it with hot glue in a few places just to help hold it, because it kind of wants to slip because of the shape of the football frame. So when I literally get to the end of my rope, I'm going to secure that at the back side of the frame, and it just worked out perfectly for the length of the rope. So I'll just secure that with hot glue, and then I'll start my next rope over on the other side and then continue on. And when I get to the top, I'm just going to finish that off. I will leave a little bit of a flat spot and not go all the way, because that's where I'm going to hot glue my little wood stem. And this is going to be the stem of the acorn. So now it's time to dress this up a little bit. I'm going to pull off some of the leaves that I want to use. I'm using a variety, some of the more red ones, using orange, some with green, just kind of all the colors, because that's what fall's all about. And then I'm going to be using 3 pine cones and a few berries, and just give this a little bit of a fall floral flare at the top. Wow, say that fast 3 times. So once I have most of my leaves and pine cones on, then I'm going to add these big berries that I got at Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to add in a few of those. And then anywhere there are some bare spots, I will add some more leaves and just fill it in. So after I got my florals on, that's when I felt like the little top of my acorn was not big enough. And so I did add 2 more rows of rope on the bottom of that edge, just to make it look a little bit more proportionate, so that it looked more like an acorn. And I'm really happy that I decided to do that. I think it looks a lot better. This is the first topiary that I will be making, and I will be using a glass candle holder from Dollar Tree, one of these carvable styrofoam pumpkins, also one of these glitter pumpkins. They do have these in several different colors. I'm going to use the gold one. And then I found these glittery purple and gold pumpkins in this 4-pack, and I just really like the color of these. So I will be using one of these for the top of the topiary. First, I'm going to remove the tag and the stem from the styrofoam pumpkin, and the stem just pulls right out. It's just stuck on with like a toothpick. And then I am going to paint my pumpkin using just some black craft paint. This is just apple barrel craft paint. You could use chalk paint, just whatever you have on hand. I found that using a foam brush and the craft paint worked really well for this. I did do 2 coats of the paint to cover up all of the orange on the pumpkin, and then I wanted to give this a little glitter, so I'm just taking some glitter spray paint that I had on hand. This is just a gold shimmer paint, and I'm just going to give this a little bit of glitter on this pumpkin just to brighten it up. Originally, I had spray painted the candle holder with that glitter spray paint as well, and I didn't like it. I wanted it to be a little bit more gold, so I actually took just a metallic gold paint and spray painted it with that instead. And I ended up liking that a lot better. So now I'm just going to hot glue my black pumpkin to the top of the candle holder, and I'm just going to center it as well as I can. Then I'm going to take my glitter pumpkin and just remove the stem. It just pulls right out, and then I'm going to hot glue it on top of the black pumpkin. Then I'm going to take one of those cute purple and gold glitter pumpkins, and I'm going to leave the stem on this one and just glue it on top of that gold glitter pumpkin. Then I'm going to finish this off by just tying a piece of ribbon around the candlestick. This is some that I had on hand, but you could also pick some up at Dollar Tree. They have all kinds of different ribbon. Again, I will be using a glass candle holder for the base, and also the styrofoam carvable pumpkin from Dollar Tree. Then for this one, I will be using one of these kind of cream colored pumpkins and one of these small pumpkin clips that come on this 3-pack. And then I will also be using some of this raffia that comes in a 3-pack from Dollar Tree. For this topiary, I am going to spray the candle holder with this nutmeg colored Rust-Oleum spray paint. At first I thought it would be best to spray paint the styrofoam pumpkin, and I tried it with this heirloom white Rust-Oleum spray paint, and it did not cover very well, and it was really sticky feeling, and it took forever to dry. So I did a couple coats with that, but then I ended up going in and painting over it with just some ivory chalk paint from Waverly, and that worked way better. So I would recommend just painting it with chalk paint from the very beginning. Next, I'm going to take a light green paint. This is called Aloe from Americana. You can use any craft paint or chalk paint, and I am going to paint that medium-sized ivory colored pumpkin, and this one I will remove the stem as well, so it just pulls out just like the other ones, and then I'm just going to paint it with a couple coats of that green paint. I decided that I wanted a little bit more dimension or detail on the candlestick, so I'm just taking some of the ivory colored chalk paint and dry brushing a little bit onto the raised areas of the candlestick. And this is just going to give it a little bit more of an aged look and make it not so flat looking. It'll give it more dimension. I'm going to use the same technique and the same ivory chalk paint and dry brush on the green pumpkin as well. When you dry brush, you want to just have a very little bit of paint on your brush so that just a little bit of it comes off on kind of the raised portions of your project. Then I'm going to take some Waverly chalk paint in the color Truffle and do the same technique on the big styrofoam pumpkin that I painted white. I'm just going to dry brush this brown on this pumpkin, and that will help break up the stark whiteness of it. So now I'm ready to assemble this topiary, and just like the first one, I'm going to hot glue the larger pumpkin onto the top of the candle holder. And a little tip for centering this is there is a seam on the pumpkin and a seam on the side of the candlesticks, and if you line those up, then it makes it a little bit easier to center it. So now I'm going to take a couple strands of the raffia and I'm just going to tie a knot in the center. This just helps hold them together and it makes them a little easier to work with. And then I'm going to glue that knot in the center of the top of that white pumpkin. Next, I'm just going to wrap the raffia around a little bit. I want it to look a little bit messy, and so I just kind of folded the ends up and wrapped it around, and then I'm just going to glue that green pumpkin onto the top of that to hold it all in place. Then I'm going to take another little bunch of raffia and glue it to the top of the green pumpkin. Then I'll take one of those small pumpkin clips, then I will pull the little clip out of the bottom of the pumpkin and it just pulls right off, and then I'll glue this little pumpkin to the top of the green pumpkin, just on top of that raffia, and again I'm leaving the stem on this one since it is the top pumpkin. Then I'm going to take about 3 strands of raffia and just tie a bow and glue that to the candlestick underneath that large pumpkin just to finish this topiary off as well. For this sign, I will be using 3 of these little wood pumpkin signs from Dollar Tree and 1 of these maple leaf garlands that have some berries and also a little pumpkin on them. And I also picked up 1 of these packets of these metal words that there are 3 words in a package: thankful, harvest, and welcome. First, I'm going to remove the stickers off of the backs of these wooden pumpkin signs. So I actually was going to use 4 of these at first, that's why you see 4 here, but I decided just to use 3 in my final project. But after I had removed the stickers, there was a sticky residue on the backs of these pumpkins, so I am using some of this Goo Gone that I got at Dollar Tree, and I'm just putting a little bit on a paper towel and then wiping the sticky residue right off of the back of these. It works really good. I would recommend not rubbing too hard or it might take the paint off, but just gently rub and it took the stickiness right off. So like I said, I decided just to use 3 of these pumpkins. I thought it fit with the word better, and so I'm just testing out to see what I think of all of the words that were in that package. I can believe there was 3 of these metal words for $1 at Dollar Tree. They were thankful, harvest, and welcome. And I decided that I was going to go with welcome. To assemble this, I'm just going to use my hot glue gun and some Gorilla Glue sticks and just put some glue in between each of the pumpkins and glue them together. And I just want to make sure that the bottoms all line up so that when you sit this up, it will stand without being wobbly. And next I'm going to take my welcome word and also just use the hot glue on this to glue it onto the front of the pumpkins. Now I'm going to add a little bit of color to this. I'm just going to cut off a few leaves, just like 4 or 5 leaves off of my garland, and a few of those berry bunches to embellish this sign with. And once I decide where I want them, I'm just going to use a little bit of hot glue to attach them up by the stems of the pumpkins. For this project, I will be using one of these wire pumpkin wreath forms from Dollar Tree. I'm also using some spray paint in the color of nutmeg. This is from Rust-Oleum. I picked this color because it's about the same color as the decorative nautical rope or jute rope that I'm using for this project. And you could use this Dollar Tree rope, but you will need about 100 feet. So I'm using the bigger rolls of jute rope, and you can get this at Hobby Lobby or Michael's or even Walmart. I will also be using some of the smaller jute twine just to wrap the stem of the pumpkin in. I'm using this wired ribbon from Dollar Tree. I love the fall plaid colors in this, and there's 9 feet on this roll. You could use florals from Dollar Tree, but I happened to find this bunch for $5 at Walmart in the fall florals, and I just really liked the flowers. They were large and just looked like a quality bunch of flowers for $5, and I love the color scheme with the creams and the reds, so I'm going to use some of these. For tools, I'm just going to be using my scissors and a pair of wire cutters to help cut those flowers. And then I'll also be using my hot glue gun and glue sticks. I usually use Gorilla Glue sticks, but regular ones would work fine for this project. So first, I'm just going to give this wire wreath form a coat of this nutmeg spray paint just to kind of tone it down a little bit, so when the wires are showing a little bit, they won't be really obvious. Once my spray paint is dry, then I am going to take my rope, and this is a 50-foot roll, but I did end up using about 100 feet of this, so just keep that in mind if you're wanting to do this project. And this, because I'm going to be weaving it in and out of the wire, I can't really use this whole roll because it won't fit through the spaces, so I'm going to pull off part of the roll, just a fairly long length of rope, and then just kind of wind it around my hand to make a bunch that I can weave in and out of the frame. So I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm going to put one end of the rope just through that wire at the end and pull it through. You can just glue it along here. I didn't glue mine right away, mostly because my hot glue gun wasn't hot yet, so I just pulled it through and left a little bit of an end, and then I'm just weaving the rope in and out, so over and under, back and forth, and then when I get to the end, I'm going to wrap it around the outside wire and then just go back the other way, going over and under, the opposite of the ones that I just did. So see, I'm wrapping it around here, and then I'm going over the wire that I previously went under, and then I'm going to go under the next one that I went over before. So just alternating back and forth all the way around, and then or all the way across, and then I'm just pulling the rope tight as I go, and I'm just going to continue this back and forth, covering the whole pumpkin. When you come to the end of your rope, you can just fold it under, and I just took some hot glue and glued it on the underside, inside it's not going to show. And then I took another piece of rope and started it, and I just glued the end of it right where I left off and then continued on. Then I'm going to take the small jute twine, and on the back side of the stem I'm going to take my hot glue and just run it along the bottom wire of the stem to start the twine. Then once I have that glued on, I'm just going to wrap the twine all the way around the stem, and then I will glue it off on the top of the wire on the stem to kind of hide the wire. And then I'm going to just wrap the twine around the stem a few more times just to give it a little thickness and to fill it in a little bit. Then I'll just add a little hot glue to finish it off and trim the end. And here is what it looks like so far. I think you could leave it like this and it looks great, but I'm going to add some ribbon and florals. So here's what it looks like with the bow, and again, you could just leave it like this and I think it looks really nice. But I decided I'm also adding some florals, so I am choosing just a few from that bunch that I bought at Walmart, and I'm going to cut them off of that bunch, and I left about a 4-inch wire on them so that I could just push them through and kind of arrange them, move them around until I got it how I liked it. And then once I had them all arranged how I wanted them, then I was able to just glue them all down. You could also add like one of those galvanized words from Dollar Tree like this, or just leave it without. And I decided just to leave it with just the florals, and I really love how it came out. For this project, I will be using one of these galvanized bottle cap signs from Dollar Tree and some of this water slide decal paper from Hippo. This water slide decal paper is so easy to use, and I'm really excited to show you how. You can add just about any image onto a project by printing it on this paper using an inkjet printer and then transferring it to your project. And I was really impressed with the quality of my image when it printed on this paper, and it was really easy to transfer to my projects as well. So let me show you how fun and easy this is to use. When you put this paper in your printer, you do want to make sure that you put it in so that it prints on the shiny side. And this paper is basically 8.5 by 11, so it should fit in any printer. Your printer does need to be an inkjet printer for this to work, but the design prints off beautifully on this as long as you're using a high quality image. And I was really impressed with how vivid the colors were and just how nice it really looked. So I've created some designs that are free for you to download. I will put that link down in the description box below, and I will be using part of this design for this next project. The water slide paper comes with great instructions, and on the instructions it says to give your project 3 coats of matte sealer spray, and this is to seal that ink because the ink in your printer is not waterproof necessarily, so this will help seal the ink, keep it from running. So I'm going to do 3 light coats of this matte sealer, and I'm going to wait until each coat is completely dry. And it says to wait about 10 minutes. You want to make sure that each coat is dry. You can also use a blow dryer on a low setting to help speed up this drying process. And I did go ahead and spray my other 2 designs for the next project. So here's a sneak peek of what's to come. But stay tuned because this doesn't tell you really anything about what I'm going to do with these, and I'm really excited to show you. Once the matte sealer is completely dry, then I'm going to cut out my design, and the instructions say to leave at least 1/8 of an inch around your design. I left a little bit more, but I just cut this out. Next, I'm going to place this in some just room temperature water, and the paper does curl up. That's totally fine. And you're going to leave it in there for about 30 to 60 seconds. I left mine in a little bit longer. I think that works a little bit better. And once it starts absorbing the water, then the design will kind of relax and not curl up as much. But after about 60 seconds, then I'm going to take my design out of the water. I'm going to put a little bit of water on my project just to make it easier to transfer to. And then I'm just going to use my finger and my thumb and just slide that design up a little bit, and then grab the paper on the bottom edge and just slide it right out from under that design, and it slides out so easy. It works really well. I expected this to be wrinkly, and I expected it to maybe tear, but it did not. It worked great. And then I'm gently going to dab some of the excess water out from under, kind of push it out from under that design and just dab any excess water away. And then I'm going to set that aside and let it completely dry for at least 3 hours. Once it is completely dry, then I am going to add some embellishments. I'm going to create a bow using this black and white checked ribbon from Dollar Tree, just looping it back and forth till I have 5 loops on each side, and add a center loop. And then I'm going to use a piece of floral wire just to tie around the center and twist it real tight to keep the bow all together. Then I'm going to fluff out the bow just by pulling on some of those loops, and I will hot glue that to the top of my little bottle cap sign. And I did want to add a little bit more color to this. I wanted something with some orange in it to kind of bring out those pumpkins. So I'm using some of this berry garland from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to wrap it around a pencil and kind of make it a little curly cues, and just do a couple of those and tuck them underneath the bow and glue them in just to add just a little bit more color. For this next project, I will be using one of these 11 by 14 artist canvas boards from Dollar Tree. I will also be using 4 of these paint stir sticks. These are the larger ones, the 5-gallon paint stir sticks, and you can get them at Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's. And I found this peel and stick wallpaper at Dollar Tree. I'm going to be using 1 sheet of this. A couple other things I'll be using are these pumpkins, one of these little pumpkin signs from Dollar Tree, as well as one of the pumpkins off of this little hanging pumpkin football sign, also from Dollar Tree. You really don't need these exact ones, just a couple of pumpkin shapes that are 2 different sizes will work. So first I'm going to adhere my adhesive wallpaper to the canvas board, and it's a little bit longer. It's the perfect width, but just a little bit longer, so I'm just marking and cutting off the excess of that wallpaper sheet, and then I am going to stick that to actually the back side of the canvas board because I think it will stick better to that instead of trying to stick it to the actual canvas, which has more of a texture to it. And once I got my edges lined up on this peel and stick wallpaper, it was very easy to put down. I didn't end up with any bubbles or wrinkles or anything. I thought this worked really well. I'm going to need to cut down my paint stir sticks, so I am marking them so that they are 1 inch longer on each side for the top and the bottom. So the canvas is 14, so I'm marking these at 16 inches, and I'll cut 2 at 16 inches. And I thought I was going to assemble this a little bit differently than I actually ended up doing. So the 2 side pieces you want to cut at 14 inches. So you'll have 2 at 16 and 2 at 14. And I just used my miter box and saw to cut these off. This is a great tool. I highly recommend getting one to have in your crafting tools. It just makes projects like this really easy. Then I'm going to use a little piece of sandpaper and just smooth out those cut edges and get any splinters or rough places all smoothed out. Next, I'm going to paint the tops and the sides of my stir sticks with some black chalk paint. While those are drying, I'm going to take my little pumpkin sign and remove the little stand. It just pulls right off. I'm going to remove the label from the back because I am going to be painting the back, and this is the side that we're going to see. So I'm going to make sure I get all of the label and the adhesive off of that. And I am going to remove that little sunflower piece that is on the pumpkin. And I was going to remove the bow as well, but I decided to leave it on, and I'm just going to hot glue it out of the way so it doesn't show from the other side. And then I'm also going to hot glue that little sunflower back onto the pumpkin, but I'm going to put it in the center of the pumpkin. And these are just going to help hold the pumpkin up off of my project just to give it a little bit more dimension. The edges of this pumpkin were a little bit rough, so I did go over it with some sandpaper also. Then I'm going to paint this pumpkin using some ivory, or this is called chiffon cream chalk paint, just an off-white chalk paint, and I did have to do 2 coats on this. Then I'm going to take one of the pumpkins off of that pumpkin and football hanging sign, and I am going to paint the back side of it a sage green color. Again, I went over it with some sandpaper, and going over where the little staple holes are with the sandpaper really just filled them in, and you don't even see them. I'm using a chalk paint. You could use just an acrylic craft paint as well. And I am just painting the back side and around the edges. So here's a little tip. If your paint seems dry, if you touch it, if you put your hand on it and it still feels cold, then it is not completely dry. And so if you touch it and it feels just room temperature, then it's dry, but if it still feels cold, not dry yet. So while the first coat of paint is drying on that white pumpkin, I am going to go in and do a little bit of dry brushing with the off-white paint onto my black frame pieces. And I went a little heavy on this, and I actually went a little too heavy and had to go back and darken it up a little bit. Okay, now my pumpkin is dry, so I'm going to add that second coat of paint on this. Then I'm going to add some dry brushing with the white paint on my green pumpkin. I'm going to go around the edges, and then I'm going to add some dry brush lines, but I'm going to do them kind of down in a curved motion so that it kind of shows the shape of the pumpkin, kind of giving it a rounded look. This will just give it a little bit more of a three-dimensional look. Once that second coat of paint is dry on the white pumpkin, I am going to do the same type of dry brushing, but I'm using the green paint that I used on the other pumpkin for the dry brushing on this. And I'm going to do those curved lines as well. So I didn't think my frame pieces had enough contrast between them and that wood background, so I did decide to go ahead and darken them up a little bit. I'm still letting some of that dry brush that I did earlier show through so that they still have that aged look, but I just darkened them up a little bit. So instead of gluing my frame pieces onto just the wallpaper, I decided to use a razor knife and just trim a little bit of the wallpaper away so that I can glue those frame pieces to the canvas board itself. I felt like this would just make it a little bit stronger. I'm not sure this was really necessary, however, because the wallpaper was pretty stuck down to the canvas board. I'm going to glue the top and bottom pieces on first, and here I'm just making sure that I have an inch overlap on each side so that my frame piece is centered, and then I'm going to just adhere this with some hot glue. I always use Gorilla Glue sticks in my glue gun just because they hold better, but I think regular hot glue would be fine for this too. Next, I'm going to add my side pieces. I'm going to line the outside edge of the stick up with the outside edge of the canvas, and this is going to leave an overlap. I like the way this looked. It kind of looked like a crate maybe to me, and I'm just making sure that it's centered, and then I'm going to attach it with hot glue. And then I'll repeat the same thing with the other side. So now I'm going to position my pumpkins where I will be attaching them, but I am not going to attach them yet. So I'm just positioning them, and then I'm going to see where I want to place my wording. And here is where that water slide decal paper comes in. I've cut out this design that I printed out that says Happy Harvest, and I'm just positioning that where I want it. I think it will be easier to put this on if the pumpkins are not attached, so I'm going to just position it, and then I'll remove those pumpkins so that I can attach it a little bit easier. So again, I'm going to take my decal and I'm placing it in the room temperature water for 60 seconds. After 60 seconds, I will take it out, and I'm going to again put just a tiny bit of water on my project and then position my decal where I want it. Now that I have it where I want it, I'm going to take those pumpkins off of the project so it will be easier to put my decal on. And again, I am just going to be sliding that paper right out from under the design. And this is positionable a little bit after you get it slid out, as long as you have enough moisture on it. So you can kind of move it around a little bit carefully right at first. But again, it just went on so easy. I think this is a great alternative. If you don't have a cutting machine where you can do vinyl or something like that, this is an amazing alternative to that. You can do so many different projects with this, and I will put the link to it in the description box below. The hippo water slide transfer paper is very affordable. You get 20 sheets in a package and you could do tons and tons of projects with it. And you can basically do any design that you can print on your printer. And look how nice this looks. I am very, very impressed. Before I attach my pumpkins, I'm going to add a little bit of detail to the edges using a Sharpie marker and just doing some broken dotted lines, longer and shorter kind of squiggly lines around this, just to kind of outline the pumpkin and really make it stand out. And then I'm also going to put some curved lines down the center of the pumpkin to give it that more dimensional look as well. And I did the same thing to the green pumpkin. Now I'm going to attach my pumpkins, so I will glue the larger pumpkin right up against the frame on the right hand side. And then I'm going to take a couple of these tumbling tower blocks and I'm going to use these as spacers to lift that green pumpkin up higher so that I can set it up over the top of the frame. And I'm going to glue the little blocks down and then glue the pumpkin on top of that. And I love the three-dimensional look that this has. I'm going to glue a little bit of Spanish moss to the bottom of the white pumpkin. I also tied a simple little bow from that black and white check ribbon, and I'm hot gluing that to the top of the white pumpkin. I wanted to add a little something to the green pumpkin, so I am taking this thin jute twine and I'm going to wrap it around the stem 3 or 4 times, just tie a little knot, and then trim off the ends. The last step is to add a hanger, so I am going to use a little bit thicker jute twine and I am going to thread this underneath the side piece because it's sitting on those top and bottom pieces, so there is a gap, so you can just thread it through there. And then I'm going to make a little crisscross on the front of the frame on those corners, tie them in the back, and then leave enough for a hanger, and then I will put it through on the other side, make the crisscross and tie it off. And that's an easy way and a decorative way to make a really cute hanger. And after I did this, I just had to put the little crisscross jute twine on the bottom corners as well, just to finish it off. And I love, love, love how this turned out. And I love how that water slide decal looks on here. Just a fun project all the way around. I loved making this. Well, since that last project was a little more involved, let's do one that's a little easier. For this, I am using a bamboo cutting board from Dollar Tree, and I printed out this design on the water slide paper. This design is also available on that free download that is linked in the description box below. And after printing this, I did spray it with that matte finish sealer to help seal the ink, and then I'm just cutting around the design. Then I'm going to put my design in the water for 60 seconds, and then I will take it out of the water and adhere it to my project. I'm going to be centering the Hello Fall with the little wreath around it in the center of my cutting board, and then I'll be adding those other details at the top and the bottom. So I'm going to add just a little bit of water to my surface, and then I'm going to slide that decal up so there's a little edge showing, and then I'll position that onto my project, and then I'm just going to slide that paper right out from the bottom. And again, it just adheres to the project so nicely, and then dry off the excess water. And then I'm going to add those other top and bottom designs, and that's all I'm going to do to this. I just wanted a little sign. You could put a hanger on the back. I didn't. I just put it so I could sit it on a shelf, but I really like how this looks. You obviously cannot use it as a cutting board. It's just decorative, but I think it's really pretty. And the water slide decal paper makes this a super easy project. I will be using this wire pumpkin wreath form from Dollar Tree to recreate a fall wall decor piece that I saw on the Kirkland's website for $35. I'm going to be decorating this in more muted farmhouse colors, but you could totally do this in the bright fall colors if you'd like. I'm going to be using 2 of these lamb's ear stems that I picked up at Walmart. These were $2 a piece. I'm also going to be using some of these white berries that I got from Dollar Tree, as well as a couple of these little white pumpkins. These are the ones from Dollar Tree that come in a 3-pack, and they have the little clips on the bottom. I'm also going to add in a couple of pine cones. These are just some that I had left over from Christmas crafts last year, so I'm just going to pull out a few of these. And I'm going to be using this wide buffalo check wired ribbon. I picked up this roll at Hobby Lobby. I got it 40% off, which made it $6 for 75 feet of ribbon. And this is really nice wired ribbon. You can get the buffalo check ribbon sometimes at Dollar Tree, but I find it's kind of hit or miss. And since I'll probably be using a lot of this, I purchased this 75-foot roll at Hobby Lobby. I'm going to start off by making the bow for the bottom of my pumpkin, and so I'm going to kind of figure out what size I want to make that, and then I am going to be making 3 loops. I'm just going to loop this back and forth until I have 3 loops on each side, and then I'm going to add another loop in the center. So this is going to give me a total of 7 loops for my bow. Then I'm going to take a piece of wire. It can be floral wire, a little bread twisty tie, a chenille stem or pipe cleaner, and just put that through the center of the bow and twist it tightly on the back to secure your bow. And you can also use this to secure your bow to the wire frame. Then I trimmed the ends of my ribbon, and I am actually going to use a black zip tie from Dollar Tree to attach my bow to the frame, just because I think this will secure it really well. Now that I have my bow attached to the frame, I'm going to start adding my florals, and I'm going to add some lamb's ear on each side, kind of behind the bow. And then I will secure that into place using some hot glue. Then I'm going to add in some of my white berries, and I have 2 different kinds. I have some that are a little bit larger and then some that are smaller, almost like a baby's breath. And I liked using the 2 different kinds because I wanted them still to be white, but I like the variation that the 2 different berries adds. Next I'm going to add in my pumpkins, and to do this I'm going to take a piece of floral wire, and it's probably about 6 inches long. I'm going to fold it in half, and then I'm going to insert it into the bottom of the pumpkins. Now these are just like styrofoam pumpkins, so they poke down in there really easily. I'm going to add a little hot glue to the hole that I just made and then stick that wire down in there and let it set up. Once the glue has hardened, I'm going to give that wire a twist about an inch down from the bottom of the pumpkin, and then I'm going to attach it to the wire frame. And the reason I'm doing this is because this will cause it to actually stick up more and not get buried in the florals or the ribbon, because if you had to glue it directly to the frame, it would be really far down and it wouldn't stick up, and I want it to be a little more prominent. And I'm doing the same thing with the other pumpkin, and then I'm also going to do the same thing with the pine cones. I did decide to add a little bit more lamb's ear into this before I added the pine cones, and then like I said, I'm going to put wires on the pine cones, just hot glue them on, and that way I can make them so they stick out a little bit more. And I know it seems a little weird to put the pine cones in a fall wreath because normally we think of them for Christmas, but I really like the looks of them in this. I think, why not? I mean, pine cones are on the ground all the time, and so I think it just adds a nice different texture and variety to this. So now I am just filling in some places with some more of the berries, and anywhere there's a little bit of a hole or a gap, I'm just adding a little bit more of the lamb's ear or some berries. So now that I have the bottom the way that I like it, I'm going to add a little bit to the top, and I'm basically going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to make a bow and add some greenery and just make it a little bit smaller than what is on the bottom. So here I'm making my bow, and instead of 3 loops on each side, I only did 2 plus the center loop, so this bow is just 5 loops total. And instead of centering the bow, I am going to put it off center just a little bit to the right because I don't want to cover up the stem all the way. Then I'm going to add the lamb's ear. I'm also going to add this pine cone. Now this one was a little bit bigger and it didn't have the white on it, but I kind of disguised it, made it look a little bit smaller by hiding part of it behind the bow. Then I will go ahead and add some berries to this as well. Now the pine cones that I used on the bottom had a little bit of white on them, and since the one on the top that I used did not, I just added a little bit of white or ivory colored chalk paint to that pine cone. So here it is all finished. I spent less than $10 to recreate this wall decor piece that I saw on Kirkland's website for $35. So I'm really pleased with it. I love the color scheme. It's very farmhouse, and it's something that would be really easy to change up if you prefer the more traditional fall colors. For this, I will be using this wood pumpkin cutout from Dollar Tree. I'll also be using this Happy Harvest sign from Dollar Tree, and I'm only going to be using the center portion of it for this project. I will be using 8 blocks out of the Tumbling Tower game that you can find in the toy section at Dollar Tree. And I'll be using one of these metal galvanized words from Dollar Tree. These are in the fall section, and they have the 3 words thankful, harvest, and welcome. I picked up this Shiplap 12 by 12 scrapbook paper at Hobby Lobby. They were 4 for $1, and I'm going to be using 1 sheet for this project. And I'm going to be using a little bit of this black and white buffalo check ribbon from Dollar Tree, as well as a little bit of the lamb's ear and white berries that I had left over from the first project. To start off, I'm going to remove that center part from the sign, and I am going to be painting the back side of this. I'm using a color called Wedgwood. It's just a light green, kind of a sage green, but you could use any color that you'd like. I realized that I needed to fill in the hole, so I'm using a little bit of hot glue. And here's a tip. I put something metal underneath it, and that way once the glue sets, it will just snap right off, and if you press it down well, it will make a nice smooth surface. And if you do get any areas that are raised, you can take a little bit of sandpaper and just sand it down. Then I'm going to paint that back side of the sign with the green paint, and I'm going to also paint around the edges. While my paint is drying, I'm going to take my scrapbook paper and the wooden pumpkin cutout and use some Mod Podge to cover the whole one side of the pumpkin, and then I will be gluing that to the paper. And since this is a shiplap pattern, I wanted to make sure that my lines are straight up and down, so that's something to definitely pay a little extra attention to. And I can pretty much guarantee that you're going to get some bubbles in here. I just worked them out as much as I could, and I had an area that didn't stick really well, so I added some more Mod Podge and then just rubbed it as much as I could. And some of the wrinkles will work their way out as it dries, so don't be too concerned about that, and especially in the center because we're going to be gluing that other pumpkin on top. So while the Mod Podge is drying, I'm going to take 8 of those tumbling tower blocks and I'm going to glue them together 4 in a row so that I have 2 rows of 4. Then I'm going to take some brown craft paint. I'm going to add a little bit of water to it, water it down, and this will make it more like a stain. You can use a stain. I just like using the acrylic paint because it's less messy and easier to clean up and gives you basically the same effect. Now that the Mod Podge is dry, I'm going to take a piece of sandpaper and go all the way around the edges with that, and this will give you a nice edge. It's a little easier than trimming it with scissors, which is hard to get a close cut. And because this is a piece that could sit on a table or on a shelf, I did want to finish the back, so I am just painting the back with some ivory colored chalk paint. I'm also going to take the ivory chalk paint and just dry brush a little bit onto the green pumpkin that I painted, just to give it a little bit more of a worn farmhouse look. Now I'm going to use some hot glue and I'm going to attach that green pumpkin to the center of the shiplap pumpkin. So really you could use any of these 3 words. They had harvest and welcome and thankful. I decided to use thankful, and I think that will be great to have out for fall all the way through Thanksgiving, and so that was what I chose. I did, however, decide to paint my word using some black spray paint. And I'm going to attach it using a little bit of E6000 and a little bit of hot glue. Then I'm just going to add a little sprig of the lamb's ear with a little bit of the berries. I'm going to glue that to the base of the stem, and then I'm going to tie it just a simple bow with that buffalo check ribbon and glue that on there as well. Next I'm going to take one of my strips of 4 little tumbling tower blocks that I glued together and painted, and I'm going to glue that to the front of the pumpkin, centered and flush with the bottom of the pumpkin, because this is going to make the stand so the pumpkin will stand up. And then I will take the second one and I will hot glue it to the back of the pumpkin in the same way. So basically the pumpkin is going to be sandwiched between these 2 strips of wood. And that's all there is to this project. Pretty easy, and I think it turned out great. I am going to be using one of the tobacco baskets that I picked up at Target for $3. And I'm also going to be using the lid from this cute little Hello Fall box that I got at Dollar Tree. I love how it has the design on the inside, and so I'm going to use the lid for this project, and I'm going to save the box and use it in some other fall decorating. In my little Target haul, I picked up this little string of mini lights that has the eucalyptus. I'm going to be using this, but if you don't have these, you can pick up some lights at Dollar Tree, or you can even use some of this berry garland that Dollar Tree has been carrying as well. And I'm going to be making a bow out of some Dollar Tree ribbon. I'm going to be using this cute red truck ribbon that I picked up, but you can use any of the fall ribbon. This is another one of my favorites, this really pretty plaid, but just whatever you like. And I'm going to be using some Velcro adhesive fasteners. You can pick these up in Dollar Tree, but I had some others on hand that I'll be using because they're a little bit bigger. And I'm going to be staining my basket, so I have this stain on hand, and I'm going to give it a try. So I didn't have any gloves handy, so I stuck my hand in a plastic Ziploc bag, and I'm using that to sort of help keep my hands a little bit cleaner. I'm using this stain, and right away I decided this is too dark and I don't think this is what I want to use. I really should have tested it on the back of the basket first, but I just kind of jumped in and went for it. However, because of the placement of where I'm going to put the little Hello Fall lid, I think I can work with this. So I am going to instead use some brown acrylic paint and water it down. And this is one reason I really like using the acrylic paint more than stain, because I can play with it. It's a little more forgiving, and I can water it down until I have kind of the perfect shade that I want, and I really want the wood grain of the basket to show through, so I end up adding quite a bit of water to this, and I did test it on the back this time to get it the consistency that I wanted it to be. So now I am using a foam brush. I am just going to go over the entire basket and give it a nice coat of this acrylic paint stain. So now that my basket is all dry, I am going to add my lights, and I am going to use some of these adhesive Velcro fasteners to attach the light battery pack to the basket because I want to be able to take it off. I actually made this whole thing so I could change up this basket and everything is removable, and so I'm placing the battery pack on the basket so that I can easily turn it off and on from the back side of the basket. And then I am adding that box lid to the top of the battery pack using another one of those adhesive Velcro fasteners. I wrapped the lights around the stem of the pumpkin a couple of times, and then before I go too much further, I'm going to go ahead and make my bow for this project. This ribbon is nice because the pattern shows on both sides of the ribbon, so I am going to just loop my ribbon back and forth till I have 3 loops on each side, and I am leaving a tail, and then I'm going to make a 7th loop that's right in the center, and then also leave a tail from that. And then you can use floral wire, you can use another piece of ribbon. I'm just using the twisty tie that came off of my little light set and putting that through the center of the bow and twisting it tightly. When I'm sure I'm happy with the size of my bow, then I cut it off of the spool, and then I'm fluffing up all of my loops to make it a nice full bow. And then I'm going to use a zip tie to attach this to the basket, but again, you could use floral wire, you could use twine or string or ribbon, whatever you have, just to attach it to the basket. And now that my bow is in place, I'm just wrapping my lights around, kind of in and out, just wherever it looks good. And you would do the same if you were using like the berry garland for this. And that's all there is to this one. I love this. So here is a tip. Try to find unusual things to use in your decorating. So like using this lid from the box to use as kind of my signage or wording on another project is a great way to change things up and make them unique. And I love this piece. I am really happy with how it came out.
For this next project, we will be making this reversible Scarecrow and Snowman sign. For this, I will be using 4 of these Beware signs from Dollar Tree that they have in their Halloween section. I'll also be using 2 of these witch feet stakes, and these are going to be used for the brim of the hat. First, I'm going to cut off the ribbon hangers that are on the 4 signs, and then using some wood glue, I'm going to glue them together. You could use E6000 or some other type of strong glue to do this, but I'm just using wood glue because that's what I have on hand. Now I'm going to flip one of the signs around so it's upside down, and the reason I'm doing this is so that the holes are not on the same ends. So when I flip them together, I'm going to put the right sides together, so you're going to see the back side of these signs. And then this is going to make it so the holes don't go all the way through, and it will be easier to fill them with some wood filler. Then I'm going to take a generous amount of my wood glue and just glue these signs together. And then I will repeat this for the other 2 signs. Then I'm going to take these 2 pieces that I glued together and I will glue them together down the middle as you see here. And just a note, you don't want to get too much glue in the center here because I had a little bit of trouble with it kind of seeping out through the seam, which wasn't a big deal on this top part because I could wipe it off, but underneath I wasn't able to wipe it off and it kind of glued itself to my cardboard underneath, and so I had to kind of scrape and sand that off. So just something to be aware of when you're gluing these together. Then I'm going to push them together, make sure they're all lined up, and I'm going to add some heavy things to the top to hold it all down and together while it dries. And I did decide to use some clamps because I had them on hand. I don't think that you have to do this if you don't have clamps. I will put a link in the description box below for some clamps like the ones that I have. These are really handy to have for these types of projects, so if you're interested, the link is in the description box below. While my glue is drying, I am going to take the 2 witch feet stakes. I don't know what to call those. I guess that's what they are. But I'm going to pull the witch's feet off of the stakes, and they're just stapled on, so I just did this carefully so I didn't break anything, but they pulled right off. And then you could use those for a different project if you like.
Then I used a hammer to tap the staples out a little bit, and then a screwdriver to kind of pry them up, and then some needle nose pliers to pull them out. So um, the main thing is they did have a tendency to break off, so you just want to do this carefully and make sure you get a hold of them well so that you can pull them out. Next, I need to cut down the stakes, and I want to get rid of that pointed end. So from the flat end, I'm going to measure 16 inches and then cut down the stakes. I'm going to be using a miter box and saw to cut down these stakes. You can get these really inexpensively. I think they have them at Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, um, Amazon, and so I'll put a link in the description box below. But these are really handy for cutting small projects. You just put your project in there, put your wood piece in there, and just use the guide and saw it. You can saw angles or straight. It just is a really handy tool, and it's not very expensive. And I'm just using a piece of sandpaper to sand the edges, kind of round the corners a little bit, and just get off any rough spots. And as I said earlier, I had some glue kind of seep through that seam and stick to the cardboard. And so if that happens to you, you just want to make sure to take some sandpaper or a sanding block and just sand that down as smoothly as you can. Then I'm going to take some wood filler, and I got this at Hobby Lobby. You can pick it up at any hardware store, but I'm just going to take a little bit of that and a putty knife and fill those holes, and so that I'll have a smooth surface to paint. And once the wood filler is dry, I'm just going to take a little bit of sandpaper and sand it down so that it's nice and smooth. Next, I'm adding the brim of the hat to this piece, and I wanted it at an angle, and so I just kind of eyeballed it to see where I wanted it, and the high end was about 8 inches from the top and about 10.5 on the low end, but I just marked on the wood where I placed it so that I would know where to put the glue and then glue it down. And if you add a little bit of hot glue to this during this step, then you won't have to weight this down and wait for the glue to dry. I didn't do that on this first one, but I did do it on the other side. When you glue the brim piece onto the other side, you just want to make sure that it lines up perfectly with the first one. I decided to paint the snowman first, so I am going to be using some black craft paint. This is Apple Barrel that I picked up at Walmart for really cheap, like 59 cents or something like that. And I'm going to paint the snowman's hat using this. I'm also painting the brim and all of the edges of the hat with the black as well. And right about now is when I am wishing that I would have painted the brim before I glued it on, because it was a little tricky to paint this bottom edge of the brim. I'm just using a napkin and I put it up against the edge to help cut that in a little bit easier. And next I'm going to paint the snowman's face with ivory chalk paint. And I did have to do 2 coats of this. Actually, I did 2 coats of the black on the hat too, just to make sure it all had good even coverage. And then again, I'm also painting the sides and the bottom of the snowman's head. Next, I'm going to use a yardstick and I'm going to draw some lines because I want to make this look kind of like it's shiplap. So this would have been easier if the brim of the hat wasn't on it already, but I'm just lining it up along every other little notch in the top and the bottom so that I'm going to end up with, it looks like 4 slats. So here you can see I've drawn lines on every other notch, and that gives me 3 lines, so it's going to divide it into 4 sections. I'm going to be using some Waverly elephant colored chalk paint and a really tiny liner brush, and I'm going to paint my lines on. If you're not comfortable with painting the lines, you can certainly use a Sharpie marker or paint marker to draw the lines on instead. One tip if you want to paint your lines on is to get a little water and mix it into your paint, and that will make the paint flow a little bit better. Just make sure you don't have any drops of water on your brush because they'll drip onto your project and make a mess. But just adding a little bit of water to your paint will make it flow better, and then you can just practice doing those nice thin lines. If you do happen to make a mistake, you can always wipe off what you can, paint over it with the white paint, let it dry, and then try again. Then I'm going to take a bigger, fuller brush and get just a little bit of paint on it, brush off the excess, and then I'm going to dry brush a little bit on all over the white part of the project. I'm going to go along the edges and just make it look a little bit worn and distressed. Then I'm going to paint the lines on the hat and do the dry brushing using the same elephant colored chalk paint just like I did on the white part. Next, I'm going to trace the snowman's face pattern onto the piece, and I do have a link in the description box below where you can download this if you're not comfortable drawing your own snowman face. And if you need to use the pattern, you can just flip it over and on the back side rub with a pencil across every part of the pattern like you see me doing here. And then once you have that all covered with the pencil lead, then you can flip it over and then trace over the pattern with your pencil, and that will transfer the pattern to your wood piece so that you can see where to paint. Again, I am just using the black apple barrel craft paint and a paintbrush. Again, if you're not comfortable painting this, you can certainly use paint markers or Sharpies to do this. It's totally up to you. Next, I'm going to paint the nose just using some orange craft paint that I had on hand. You can use any brand or shade of the orange that you have or pick up. And I did have to do several coats of the orange paint on this. Then I'm going to take some pink colored paint. This is called Gooseberry Pink. It's by Americana. Any kind of blush colored pink will do. And I have a stipple brush that I put a little bit of paint on, and I'm taking the excess off, and then I'm just going to kind of pounce around in a circle right above where the ends of his mouth are, and this is going to make some cheeks. And a tip here is you want to start light because you can always go darker, but if you go too dark then you have to paint over it, and so it's best just to start light and add as you go. And another tip, if you don't have this kind of a paintbrush, is you can just use a napkin and kind of twist it to make a point, and I'll actually show you how I did that when I do the Scarecrow side. And then I'm going to just take my brush and some more of that black craft paint and paint his mouth. Whenever I paint faces, I always add this one little detail that just brightens it up. You want to take a small paintbrush and use the end of it, dip it in some white paint, and get a little bit of the excess off, and then just do a little bit of a dot right on the eyes. I usually do it kind of in the top corner of each eye, and that just brings those eyes to life and just makes it more whimsical. I'm also adding a little bit of detail to the nose. I'm just taking a little bit of that ivory colored chalk paint and adding a few lines where the nose kind of dips in on the top, and then a few highlights along the top edge. And then I'll also be taking some truffle colored chalk paint and adding a little bit of shading to the bottom of the nose. This looks a little bit more like shadow, and it just adds some dimension and detail to it. And this is something that could be done using a fine tip paint marker as well. And now the snowman face is done. I think it is adorable. It's so cute. So once all that paint is dry, then it's time to flip it over and work on the Scarecrow face. If you have any dust from sanding on your piece, make sure you wipe that off. And then for the Scarecrow, I'm going to be using the truffle colored chalk paint, and then another Waverly chalk paint called Cashew. It's a little bit more yellow than the ivory. Again, I'm doing the same steps that I did before with the snowman. I'm drawing the lines so that I can have those 4 sections to make it look like shiplap. And to paint the lines for the Scarecrow, I'm going to add a little bit of the cashew to the truffle, and I'm going to mix a color because I didn't want it to be too stark or dark or stand out too much. So I decided to mix a color. If you have a color that is, you know, kind of in between those two, lighter tan or brown, you can just use that, but I decided to mix my own, and so I just mixed them until I got something that I was happy with. And then I'm going to do the same steps and put the lines on the whole piece, his hat and his face. Then once the lines are done, I'm going to take that bigger brush and do the dry brushing along the edges and basically all over the piece. And I actually add a little bit more dry brushing to the Scarecrow because I want him to look a little bit more distressed. Once again, I have a pattern for the Scarecrow's face. The link is in the description box below to download that so you can print it off. And I'm going to do the same steps and transfer that to my piece. Then using the black craft paint and that same orange color that I used on the snowman, I'm going to paint the Scarecrow's face. Then I'm going to take that same gooseberry pink color, and this time I'll show you how I did the cheeks using a napkin. If you don't have one of those stipple brushes, I just kind of wrapped it around my finger and dipped it in the paint. And again, I just started really light because I didn't want to get too much, but then I'm just kind of adding it in a circle. And as you can see, it has pretty much the same effect as the stipple brush. Then I paint his mouth, and I also decided to add some eyelashes to this. At first I was a little nervous that it would make it look a little feminine, but I don't think it did. I think it just kind of added a little bit more whimsy to his eyes. And then of course I'm going to add that white dot in his eyes to brighten them up. It did take several coats of the orange paint to cover up that line that went down the middle that I painted, so it might be a good idea to trace the face on before you paint the lines and then not paint a line through the middle of the nose. Once the paint is completely dry, I'm going to take this clear matte sealer by Rust-Oleum. I picked this up at Walmart. It's about $3.96, and I'm going to spray the one side with a light coat of this just to help protect it. Then when that's dry, I'm going to turn him over and do the same thing for the other side. Once the sealer's totally dry, it is time to add some embellishments. For the Scarecrow, I'm going to be using some of this burlap ribbon from Dollar Tree, as well as some raffia. You can pick this up at Dollar Tree too. And then I'll also be using one of these flowers from this bunch I picked up at Dollar Tree. It says it's a daisy, and I guess it looks like that, but it also reminds me of a sunflower, so I'm going to use that. First I'm going to cut a square of that burlap ribbon. Now this stuff frays really badly, and I decided to use hot glue to attach this first one. Really, I think Mod Podge is a better idea. It's kind of messy, but I think it adheres it much better and helps keep the fraying down. But for this one, I attached it with hot glue. Next, I'm going to take several pieces of raffia and I'm just going to glue it along the bottom edge of the hat so that it looks like the Scarecrow's hair. Then I'm going to take about 3 strands of raffia, and I don't know, these are probably about 12 or 14 inches long, and then I'm just going to tie them into a bow. Then I'm going to glue the raffia bow to the top of the brim of the hat and add one of the flowers. And I actually meant to put these on the other side to kind of offset that fabric patch, but since I didn't do that, I decided to add a little bit of a patch on the other side of the hat to kind of balance it out. Sometimes when you're crafting, you just have to improvise. For this patch, I decided to use the matte Mod Podge, and I think it worked a lot better. It took quite a while to dry, but I just brushed some onto the burlap ribbon, and then I stuck it down and brushed some more over the top, and then I just let it dry. And it does dry clear. I know it looks white here, but it will dry clear, and this really helps keep that burlap ribbon from fraying. Now that the Scarecrow's done, it's time to add some embellishments to our snowman. I'm using this burlap ribbon I picked up at Dollar Tree last year, but I'm sure they will have something very similar to that. And this has a nice holly design to it, and I'm going to use that over the top of the brim of the hat. This was pretty easy to glue on with the hot glue, so I decided to use that. And because the ribbon is burlap and the hot glue seeps through, it's good to use that finger protector. Next, I'm going to add just a little bit of pine greenery to that hat band, as well as a little sprig of red berries. And for my last step, I'm going to trim off the extra ribbon that is hanging over the edges of the hat. And he's finished. I love this. It is so cute. It's just a decor piece to stand up um, anywhere. I have it on my hearth here, on the Scarecrow for fall, and then as soon as Thanksgiving's over, I can flip it over and have the snowman. I am so happy I decided to do this project. I know that it had a lot of steps and it was kind of involved, but I hope you decide to try it. It's well worth it. It turned out so cute. My inspiration for this piece is this natural wooden pumpkin from the Kirkland's website, and it is $35. To make this, I'm going to be using this Bandit wood veneer edging. It is a pre-glued iron-on edging that I picked up at Lowe's for about $7. And just because I already had these on hand, I'm going to be using one of these little sticks from Dollar Tree as the stem of my pumpkin, but you could totally use a stick from your yard. And I'll be using a little bit of this white and green berry garland that is also from Dollar Tree. I will be using my iron set on the cotton setting for the veneer edging, and I'll also be using some scissors and a ruler and my hot glue gun. For the first step, I will be taking the wood veneer edging and I am going to cut 8 pieces that are 24 inches long. Then I'm going to take 2 pieces and put them together with the adhesive sides facing together on the inside. And I decided to put a towel down just to help protect my work surface from the hot iron. And I did find it is easiest if you kind of weight down that other end because it wants to curl up. And then I'm going to take the iron and just press these together, and it doesn't take very long just to seal them together. And once they are stuck together, the wood edging will be pliable and while it's warm, and so you want to take it and form it into a circle while it is still warm, and then hold it in place while it cools. This just takes a minute or so, and then it will hold its shape. And then you'll repeat this process for all of the pieces that we cut so that you end up with 4 circles. Next, I'm going to take one of the circles. I am going to overlap the ends just about an inch or so and hot glue this together and hold it in place till it's set. I didn't glue all 4 circles at once before I started assembling this because I wanted to be able to adjust them while I'm assembling my pumpkin if necessary. So I'm going to take 2 of my circles and place one inside the other with the seam edges at the bottom, and I'm just making sure that they are perpendicular to each other and that it all looks even, and then I'm going to use a little bit of hot glue at the intersections to glue it together. Then I'm going to take my third piece and make sure it just fits in there nice and snug, and I'll glue the ends together and then glue it inside those 2 first pieces that I've already glued together. Now I'm going to finish putting the pumpkin together. And again, I'm taking that last piece, and before I glue it into a circle, I'm just making sure that it fits right and kind of measuring how much I need to overlap so that it fits snug, but it isn't too big or too small. Then I'm going to glue those ends together and then glue it into the pumpkin. Now, as you can see, it doesn't want to stand up straight. It wants to kind of lay over on its side. So I'm going to take just a little piece of this paint stir stick that I had left over from some other project, and I am going to just cut a piece of that big enough to put on the bottom just as a little stand to make it stand up straight. I'm just going to attach the pumpkin to the little wood stand with some hot glue. Next, I'm going to find one of these wood pieces that I think will look good as a stem, and I think they're a little bit long, so I am going to use my miter box and saw and cut it down a little bit as well. Then again, using a little hot glue, just glue that to the top of the pumpkin. Now I'm going to take some of that berry garland from Dollar Tree and just wrap some around the stem and twist it and make it look like those little vines that you see on pumpkins. So I did add a little bit of hot glue on that berry garland just to help hold it in place. And you can add as little or as much of this as you want. It's just kind of your personal preference. But I really think this is cute and a great finishing touch for this pumpkin. And then you can add a Dollar Tree LED candle to this, and it just makes a really cute fall lantern. And obviously, for safety reasons, do not use a real candle because this is made of wood, so it is flammable. But I really love how my pumpkin came out, and the Kirkland's one was $35, mine only $5 because I am able to make a second pumpkin about half the size using the supplies that I already have as well. For this next project, we are going to be making this really cute Scarecrow treat basket. First, you will need some sort of basket or container, and I picked this one up at a thrift store for $1. It is about 10 inches in diameter. You also need some burlap, and you can get this at Walmart for $3 a yard, and you'll only need about 1/4 of a yard. I'll also be using some black felt. This is just 3 pieces that I got from Walmart. You can also get it from Dollar Tree. And any type of fabric. This is just a fat quarter that I picked up from Walmart for 98 cents. You can use any pattern or color that you like. I'll be using some of this polyester fiber fill. This is just something that I had on hand, and you can really use anything to stuff the head and the arms of the Scarecrow. I always say just use what you've got. And then I am using a little bit of jute twine, and you can pick this up at Dollar Tree or Walmart or any craft store. I'll also be using just a little bit of raffia, and this is some I got at Dollar Tree. I'll be using a black and an orange Sharpie marker to draw the face for the Scarecrow. And I'll be using my hot glue gun with some Gorilla Glue sticks just because that's what I have and that's what I like to use. So I'll be using some various items to trace my shapes, but I have included a link in the description box below to all of the pattern pieces that you will need to make this. So if you don't want to figure it out you're on your own, you can get those patterns and use those. So I am cutting a double layer of burlap in this circle for the head, and it is about, I think, 6 inches, maybe a little bit larger, but like I said, the pattern is in the description box below. Next, I'm going to hot glue the 2 circles together around the edge, and I will leave about a 2 to 3 inch opening so that I'll be able to stuff it with the fiber fill. But before I stuff it, I want to draw the face on this. So I'm using the orange Sharpie to draw a triangle for the nose. And then I will be using the black Sharpie to draw the eyes and the mouth and the eyebrows. Then once the face is drawn, I can stuff the head with the fiber fill and close up the opening using my hot glue gun. To make the arms, I am using a double layer of burlap, and these are about 9 inches long and about 3 inches wide. Just make sure it's big enough to fit the pattern for the arm on. And then I'll trace my pattern onto the burlap and cut them out. So I'm going to take my hot glue gun and I'm going to glue all the way around the outside edge of the arms and just glue these 2 pieces together, and I'm just going to leave the straight end open, and that's where I'll be able to put the stuffing in. And for this, it is really useful to use something like a pencil or the end of a paintbrush to help push that stuffing down into the thumb and the end of the hand. And once I have it stuffed as much as I want, then I am going to just hot glue the end of it together. And I am trimming off some of the bigger strings that are hanging off, but it's okay to have some of them be a little bit rough and ragged because it is a scarecrow and he's kind of supposed to look that way. Next, I'm using a chalk marker to trace my brim of the hat pattern onto the felt, and then I'll cut that out. And I just cut on the inside of the line so that I don't get any of the white from the chalk marker showing on my hat. Then I'm going to use the cardboard circle pattern to cut that circle out of cardboard for the top of the hat, and I'll also cut the other black felt circle out for the top of the hat. Now I'm going to roll a little ball of the fiber fill up and set it on top of the felt, and then put the cardboard circle on top of that, and then I'll just pull up the black felt up around that fiber fill and glue it to the cardboard circle to just make a little pillow that's going to sit on top of that hat brim piece to make the scarecrow's hat. Then I'm just going to hot glue that to the center of the brim piece. And I'm going to take some twine and just wrap it around about 4 times just to make a hat band for his hat. And I just secured both ends with a little bit of hot glue. Next, I'm going to take my fabric and I'm going to figure out about how much I need for this. And so I'm going to lay it out, and I want the fabric to reach about halfway around my basket. So I just kind of eyeballed this and measured it with my basket to see if I had a length that was good. Then I laid the arms on this and rolled the fabric around it just because I want to have enough fabric so that I can glue it into a tube that the arms will fit in, and these are going to be his sleeves. Then once I have my piece cut, I took it and I did iron it to get all those creases out of it. And then I'm going to glue it together, and I'm just folding it in half and gluing it right down one edge. And I found this was the easiest way to do it, and then I'll just turn it inside out so I'll have a tube and it will look almost like a sewn seam. Then I will take one of the arms and just slip it into one end of the tube, and then I will use a little piece of jute twine to tie a bow around that and secure that. And you could glue it if you wanted to, but I didn't find that it was really necessary. And then I'm just going to repeat this step for the other arm, and you just want to make sure that the thumbs are both facing the same direction. And that's all there is to making his arms. So now it's time to assemble our Scarecrow. I'm going to glue his head to the inside of the basket, and you can see here that I made a little oops when I was drawing his face the first time. I got his eyes a little off center, but that's not going to show. So I'm just going to use some hot glue and glue the head to the basket. And next I'm just going to take a little bit of raffia. I'm just taking several pieces and folding them over and gluing them to his head just to make a little bit of hair that'll be coming out of the sides from underneath his hat. Then I'm going to hot glue the hat to the top of his head, and I folded the top of his head over a little bit and glued the hat on, and then I'm going to also attach the back of the hat to the basket behind his head to secure it. And then I just kind of played with his hat and found some places where I kind of wanted to secure it down just to make it lay right, just to give it a cute look. So now I'm going to attach his arms, and I want to make sure that the seam is facing the basket so it doesn't show. And I'm just going to position his hands where I want them to be and glue those down first so that they're in the position where they should be. And don't worry if you have extra fabric at the back of the basket, because we're going to fix that in a minute. So as you can see, I have some extra fabric, and I am just going to turn the basket over, and I am going to just gather up that extra fabric and fold it over, and then I'm just going to use my hot glue gun and secure that down so it lays nicely. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of extra hot glue over by his hands just to make sure that they are secured well. Then for the last step, I'm going to take some jute twine, wrap it around my hand 3 or 4 times. I'm going to take a little piece of twine and tie it around the center, and I'm just making a bow to put on his hat to finish him off. And now this cute little scarecrow is ready to hand out some treats.
I hope you enjoyed all of these budget-friendly fall DIYs. If you did, please hit that like button. And if you could help me hit my 100,000 subscriber goal this year by hitting that subscribe button, I would really appreciate it. It doesn't cost you anything, but it helps me out a whole lot. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a blessed day.